I don't want to attain immortality through my art. I want to attain immortality by not dying. I think we all feel the same way. But that's a bit of a problem for Christians because we believe in the resurrection of the dead. And so there's that dying part that has to come first. Going to be resurrected. So not so good if you're currently living, the prospect of death. But it is an exciting possibility if you or one of your friends is dead. So John and Peter, friends of Jesus, they're very excited. They're running as fast as they can to Jesus' tomb. They're kind of racing each other. So they can't wait to get there because there's some good news that they're hoping to find. Now, some people seem to just have a certain spiritual gift for having faith. John, he gets there, he goes and he looks, and it says he just believed. He just believes. So the story's a little vague at that point, the wording in the passage, did they understand? Did they really understand at that point that Jesus had been raised from the dead? Did they get that? Or at the very least, did they understand that the story isn't over yet, that God is somehow mysteriously at work? So you have this study of contrast. You have John and Peter, running, they're racing to the tomb to get there. And then you have Mary. She's standing and crying outside the tomb. Now, is that because Mary just doesn't get it? Is she not as spiritually advanced as John and Peter are? I don't think we should jump to that conclusion, because Mary is the one who is graced with that first vision of the risen Christ. It's hard to tell, what is a deep faith? Some people just say, I believe, and I never have any doubts. It would be nice to have that kind of faith. Some people just run and dive in without much reflection, maybe. Other people, they process things a bit more. Maybe they process things a little too much. Maybe they take a little too long to understand what's going on. So, it's very tempting to either want to be the person who just automatically believes, people who just run and take these leaps of faith. And those leaps of faith are great, especially if you can leap over all the unpleasantness in between, the suffering and the death, to get to the good feeling at the other side. And there are people who give up on hope, that they've stopped hoping that God is going to do something new. Hang on to the past. Well, what if Easter isn't about either one of those things? What if Easter isn't about avoiding suffering and escaping death? And what if Easter isn't about glorifying suffering and sacrifice? There's an old ancient saying, the way out is the way through. That seems to be what's going on in the Easter story. The risen Christ, he still has the scars of crucifixion in his hands and his feet to prove that the way out is the way through. So the good news for us is that he goes through all of this in order to lead us out with him into life. This isn't just a story about an amazing miracle that happened 2,000 years ago. Easter is meaningful to us because it's happening right now. Just like with Mary, Jesus is there. He comes to us and he's calling us out of darkness into light. Right now, he's offering to take us by the hand and pull us up, to raise us up out of the things that are crushing our spirit. So Mary's Easter story is meant to be our Easter story. It says that even when we look for Jesus and we can't find him, Jesus has already come looking for us and finds us. Even when we can't see or recognize Jesus in our life, Jesus is already there. He's already there calling our name, and he's trying to wake us up to his presence. So that's what I find so intriguing about this story. There's kind of a mystical, magical element to all of this. Resurrection is also about perception. It's about seeing the unseen. There's all of these instances of seeing and not seeing in the story. First, Mary sees the empty tomb. Then, Peter and John, they go, they look in, and they see the tomb is empty. Then, sometime later, Mary's weeping, and then she bends down, she looks into the tomb, and she sees two angels there. Now, were those angels there the whole time? Where did they come from? Was she unable to see them for some reason at first? Then Mary turns around, and again she sees something. It looks like the gardener. She's looking right at Jesus. And he asks her, "Whom are you looking for?" That's a powerful question. That's a question that we should have on our minds every day. We go out into the world. Whom are we looking for? What are we looking for? What are we wanting to see? Of course, it's Jesus asking this question. She doesn't perceive him or recognize him. And then, all of a sudden, Jesus says her name. It's like those times when maybe you're dozing off and somebody calls your name, or you're in a crowded room, and then all of a sudden your name is called. And there's something inside you. Even if you're already awake, you seem to wake up more when you hear your name called. So that's Jesus' resurrection presence, that kind of awakening presence that calls our name and wakes us up to start seeing things. But the Jesus that Mary now sees is different from the Jesus she used to have, that she used to relate to. He can now no longer be held on to or contained. He says, "Don't try to hang on to me. I am ascending to God." So this is something new and uncontrollable that's happening. And Mary has to let go of the Jesus that she had in the past, let go of that old relationship that she had, the old reality, and allow for the new thing, for God's new story to unfold. See, maybe that's why it was hard for her to see the angels in the first place, that she couldn't recognize Jesus in the first time, because in her grief, she's so consumed with the grief that she's fixated on the past, on what she's lost. And so she's unable to see God's grace in the present moment. So that's a strange thing, that sometimes our minds can be focused elsewhere and not see what's right in front of us. Here's a strange story about that. A traveler is crossing a vast desert. And in the distance, this woman, she sees a small cabin. It's the only dwelling for hundreds of miles in this desert, so she's kind of curious about it. So she walks for hours across this plain until she gets to the cabin and knocks on the door. A tired, lonely man answers and invites her in. Inside, she notices something strange. The whole place is decorated like a shrine. And at the center, on the mantle, is this photo of an attractive woman. The man explains that this is a picture of his beloved. She's been lost, she'd been lost in the wilderness and died, and probably somewhere nearby. And so he sits with this woman, and he tells her stories about his lost beloved. And then, as he's talking to her, he notices something. And he says, you have a certain resemblance to the one I lost. There's a bit of a pause. And the woman says, "Well, I have to move on. Why don't you come with me?" But the man, he just looks at her with great sadness. And he says, "How could I? That would mean leaving all of this behind." And then here's the last line of the story. "And so he bid goodbye to the woman he had been mourning all his life." But that can mean a number of different things. Probably saw that ending coming, I don't know. Taken literally, it's just a sad, ironic story. But at a deeper level, it's about how we are kept from recognizing the very thing we're looking for. The very thing that promises us life. You know, there are lots of things that keep us from seeing the promise of life. Lots of obstacles. We ask, where's the resurrection when somebody has wronged me and I'm trapped in anger or resentment? Where is resurrection when you're stuck in an exhausting job and you're just going deeper in debt? Where is resurrection when you're grieving the loss of loved ones and you know that things are just never going to be the same again? In Luke's gospel, when the women they come to the empty tomb, the angels say this. They say, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, he is risen." Now this is where we're supposed to say, oh, this is the sage advice, the wisdom that we are supposed to take in. But I say, leave it to the angel to miss the obvious point about the fragility of the human condition. You know, what it's really like to go through depression or despair. I mean, they're immortal beings, for goodness sake. How are they going to know what we're going through? So why do we seek the living among the dead? Because sometimes we feel as good as dead. Because we feel that life has sometimes stopped moving forward and it's not going to get any better. Because despair can immobilize us to such an extent we can't lift up our heads to see if there's something better around the corner. That's why we look for the living among the dead. And we can say Jesus is risen, but there are times when it feels like we've been left behind. So an angel, an immortal, deathless, all-wise angel, they're not going to know what that feels like. But someone who's died on a cross sure would. Easter is not challenging you to believe in something that you find unbelievable. It's not asking you to hope when you're in the midst of despair or depression. Easter is an invitation to keep looking and to keep listening for signs of new creation, for the new thing that God is doing. Even when it seems like life is going nowhere, keep your eyes and ears open. Just like with Mary, it's not up to us to find Jesus and work up some resurrection faith. Just like with Mary, Jesus comes looking for us. So wait for those moments. Be looking for those moments. It might be an ordinary moment. It might be, a miraculous, a mysterious moment. But wait for that moment where you might hear Jesus calling your name, and it will be like waking up. You're walking alone, and you bump into a gardener, or a traveler on the road, or a guy taking a stroll on the beach. That's what you're going to see at first. But whom are you looking for? Is there more there than meets the eye? Maybe you're talking to a friend. It could be a total stranger you're talking to. You're sharing some of your struggles with them. And suddenly, there's a deeper connection. And then it feels like somehow God has spoken your name and offered you just a little bit of consolation. At every moment, we are poised on the threshold of resurrection. Yes, God does promise us an afterlife in heaven. But that afterlife can begin today in this life. We can wake up to step over the threshold of a life that comes after a life that doesn't seem to be leading anywhere. The threshold is always there, the threshold of resurrection. The poet Rumi says, "The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where two worlds touch. The door is round and it is open. don't go back to sleep. Yeah, don't go back to sleep. Christ is risen, and he is calling us. He's calling us to step across that threshold into a new perspective. Right now, today in this life, we are rising with Christ as we face our fear and take a step toward faith. We are rising with Christ when we face our bitterness and take a step toward forgiveness. We are rising with Christ when we begin to let go of the past and take a step toward hope. There's an ancient poem that's been used by the church for thousands of years. And in it, Jesus speaks to us and says, I order you, O sleeper, to awake. I did not create you to be held a prisoner in hell. Rise from the dead, for I am the life of the dead. Rise up, work of my hands. You were created in my image. Rise, let us leave this place, for you are in me, and I am in you. Together we form only one person, and we cannot be separated. Thanks be to God. Christ is risen, and in him we rise. Amen.
Amen.